The Disgrace of Sant'Ambrogio by John Blue. Prologue. I am Father John A. Conley, a 40-year Roman Catholic priest. My Catholic grandparents settled in Boston after immigrating from Northern Ireland. Like so many in the lower classes, they traveled by faith aboard a rusty steamship. My own search for truth has taken many years, and I have traveled to many places. I've sat with Syrian tribesmen, Buddhist monks, African holy men, and have come to realize of my fellow man, many have beliefs, but only few have a true faith in God. As my days now fade, my memories still swirl on cool, quiet mornings. I will tell you a story of faith that began at a little church in Florence, Italy. I must retell the beginning of the saga as it was told to me by those who were in the city. It occurred a half a world away a few short years before I was born. Florence had suffered many tragedies in its hundreds of years, but none in its recent memory was worse than that night, the night the bridges were blown. For it was said, "Wherever the German Wehrmacht retreats, they leave a path of destruction." Chapter 1. The Night of the Destruction of the Bridges. August 3rd, 1944, 7 a.m. As the sun began to climb above the fertile vineyards of Tuscany, the citizens of Florence were being rousted out of their apartments by jackbooted German troops. "Everybody out!" yelled a German sergeant. "Men, women, children, the sick, the elderly, out!" Doors that did not open were kicked in, and still others were blown to splinters, with hand grenades. The panicked citizens who lived all along the river were herded toward the great cathedral, Duomo, or within the walled Pitti Palace courtyards. Someone shouted, "They're going to destroy our bridges!" All that day, as the sun grew hotter, so did the people's anger at the Nazis, and anyone who would have collaborated with them. In the sweltering courtyards, bewildered, crying children clung to distraught mothers. An old man cursed, "Il Duce è un traditore, Mussolini is a traitor," as he shook his feeble fist in the air. Others came together in circles of prayer. Children's frightened cries echoed between 3- and 4-story palazzos along Via dei Maci. Their sorrows were carried a few blocks farther from the river by the warm morning breeze, to Piazza Ambrogio and the modest church of Sant'Ambrogio. But the chaos at the river could not be heard through its thick stone walls, or the high, narrow, stained-glass windows of its sanctuary. Its modest stone exterior belied a magnificent single-aisle church with a chapel at the back and 4 Renaissance side alcoves. Going back to its Holy Roman roots, Sant'Ambrogio was one of the oldest churches in beautiful Tuscany. Florence had grown around it decades before the nearby great Duomo di Santa Maria del Fiore was ever conceived. Over the centuries, it had been adorned with artifacts and artworks by some of the masters. Medieval sculptures, Renaissance paintings, and 14th century frescoes. Among its most cherished artworks was a large oil painting on canvas by a contemporary of Michelangelo, Francesco Granacci. At Sant'Ambrogio, there is a marble tomb where Granacci's revered body has lain for 600 years. Every year, his oil Santa Maria had been taken from the sanctuary's stone wall for Festa di Santa Maria. The painting was carried at the front of a holy procession that moved through the city from the church along the narrow Via dei Maci. A carnival atmosphere arose as the people of Florence flocked to the celebration. At Ambrogio's church, the parade had always been a cherished tradition and days of joy. On that morning of fear and confusion, a humble priest was calmly preparing for the Mass within its sanctuary. Father Danilo Lombardi polished the engraved silver chalice and paten for the offering of Christ's blood and body. The priest had been recently assigned to Sant'Ambrogio. 6 months had not been enough time for most of the parishioners to warm up to a new padre. He would have to gain their trust to truly replace the jovial Father Gentile, who led them in prayer for a generation. As far as anyone believed, Father Lombardi was Italian but was not Tuscan, not having been in Florence long enough to have presided over the Festa di Santa Maria. Not a man of the common people, having been educated in Austria, he had curated the arts in Vienna. He was a scholar that curiously spoke fluent German. On the day of confusion, Father Lombardi continued to prepare for the Holy Communion. After that fateful day, many people thought the priest must have known the evening mass would never take place. It was still early morning, but Father Lombardi thought better of taking his usual walk to the farmer's market. Instead, he received a confession from an elderly woman who wore her black frock and veil. In her 96th year, she walked slowly as she gripped a wooden cane, barely lifting herself up the stone steps. She came to confess a minor sin committed long ago. For this, her penance was always light, consisting of a Lord's Prayer. After confessions, Father Lombardi was seen at the tomb of Granacci for over an hour, praying in silence. His young assistant, Father Bruno, attested to this in the dismaying days that followed. Sunlight streaming in through multicolored windows comforted Father Lombardi. He finished his prayer to cease the tragedy unfolding in the river district. The sound of a crying child floated in by what remained of the morning breeze, then echoed from the marble floor to the high glazed windows. At the open door, a small man appeared, slightly disheveled, hat in hand. He dipped an unsteady hand in the portico cistern, then hurriedly crossed himself with holy water. From across the sanctuary, he called out, "Father Lombardi!" At the aisle, he knelt and made the sign of the cross. He did this once more as he came closer. He had run almost all the way from the river. Rapidly, he breathed as beads of sweat dampened his brow. "Father Lombardi," he again called out. As usual, the old man was dressed in his thread-worn, loose-fitting suit. He looked like the old farmer that he was. He always sat at the front of the church during Sunday Mass and in that same black suit. "Padre, I have come with terrible news." Serenely, Father Lombardi greeted the distraught man. "Buongiorno, Signore Corsi. Have you come to pray for the weak and frightened?" "Forgive me, no. I have come to tell you what I have seen with my own saddened eyes. 5 of our partisans held by the Gestapo have been shot in front of the old Roman wall. I have come to warn you of the dangerous rumors being repeated at the farmer's market. I'm not a partisan, just an old man. I see what an old man sees, hear what an old man hears. The people in the street are suspicious people, and many of them are saying, 'Because you have made a friend with a German officer, while our partisans have confessed to you, you are the one that collaborated with the Gestapo.' I tried to tell them that this is not possible, but they will not believe. They believe only what they think they have seen. It's becoming dangerous for you in the city. If you could say something to show them that you are not what they think you are, maybe it is better if you leave Firenze." Lombardi looked down at the floor, placed a reassuring hand on Corsi's slumping shoulder, then quietly answered, "A man of God would say faith reveals what a man does not see." The old man could only respond with uncertainty in his eyes. Lombardi seemed to understand this. He said, "Kneel with me, Signore. Let us pray." The prayer comforted Signore Corsi, though sadly the people would not forgive those sins so easily. Father Lombardi finished the prayer saying, "Thank you, Signore. Now there are things I must prepare for." He escorted the old farmer back to the portico. "God go with you." Before Corsi walked beyond the open door, he again crossed himself and stared directly at the priest, lamenting, "I have not the faith that I should have." A few hours later, Father Lombardi called Father Bruno into his study. There was a letter written by him on the desk. "Did you hear, Signore Corsi?" "I could not help overhearing it. This very morning at the market, the people seemed strange toward me. Some looked away from my eyes." "I see. Though I'm sad to hear it," said Father Lombardi. "Of course, I would not want you to suffer under my dark shadow." "It's a shadow I would gladly fall under, Monsignor. You are a man of God, or would not have chosen you to lead this church. But I am also troubled by the rumors. What am I to believe?" Father Lombardi stood behind his desk, now more resolute in what he had to do. "I have written a letter to the bishop. The truth is in it. I want you to deliver it to him at the Vatican for our bishop only. For this you must leave imminently." Father Bruno thought for a moment. "But how can I get to Rome? The trains have been wrecked. I'd have to cross through German lines." "You can still travel west to Pisa and there cross the Arno to the Holy City." "Do you think it's wise for you to stay here alone?" "I mean, With all that's going on in the city, the bridges being blown, and angry partisans hiding behind every corner waiting for the Germans' retreat north? Father Lombardi, irritated and flustered by Bruno's hesitation, but raised his voice. Go! Deliver this message! Go quickly! Leave this city before it's too late! Father Bruno was visibly shocked by his priest's abrupt response. While I know you are under a great stress, this is not like you. What Father Lombardi said next puzzled his assistant. It would be wise for you to wait for the Germans to evacuate Florence before you return. If I am not here, no harm can befall you. The letter will explain why I have sent you. Father Bruno could not know what was in the letter, nor its urgency to hurry it to Rome. He said, Then I will do as you demand. I will leave before dark. Upon my return, we can only hope this dark cloud will have gone with the Germans. May God go with you, Father Bruno. After Bruno had left, the Father Lombardi slowly closed the bronze doors and locked them with a heavy iron bar. The sweltering day wore on. Wehrmacht engineers efficiently wired the bridges with high explosives. By late afternoon, all residents from the river district had been moved and detained. The hot August sun began to melt beyond the hills. German troops casually patrolled deserted streets and empty gathering places. At the Piazza Ambrosio, plainclothed Gestapo sat at a shaded cafe table, in clear view of Sant'Ambrogio, watching, waiting. At sunset, most German troops had moved north to the Gothic line, at last giving the partisans their chance for revenge. For just as the Gestapo had been surveilling the church, so had they. Abruptly, the running thud of heavy boots were heard closing around the church. Italian partisans had come for battle. They knew this house of God had already been occupied by their well-armed enemy. Flanking the front steps were 6 or 7 Germans standing guard, 2 more standing around a canvas-covered truck parked at the back door. Every tall candle had been lit in the peaceful sanctuary, glowing stained in the night. Father Lombardi was seen through the open door. Dishonoring the sanctuary was Gestapo Colonel Ziegler, who at dawn had ordered the execution of their comrades at the Roman wall. The first shot cracked as an Italian bullet found a German soldier standing on the terrace. His lifeless body rolled down the stone steps to the ground. A startled corporal ordered, "Take cover! Return fire!" He called into the sanctuary, "Colonel, we are under attack." Several more shots flew in both directions. In the dark, an angry partisan yelled, "We want the traitor Lombardi!" Another fuming voice called out, "Lombardi the collaborator." The Germans quickly scrambled behind their trucks. They fired at gun that flashed in the shadows. Another battle, baptized in blood, echoed off the ancient stone walls. There was only one thing that could have stopped the fighting, and that would mean the end of Father Lombardi. At precisely 9:50 p.m., the first explosion felt like an earthquake. An apocalyptic fireball lit up the night sky, reflecting red flame on upturned, astonished faces, shattering windows into empty apartments. Art galleries and civic buildings shook to their stone foundations. Screams and cries from 6,000 confined citizens rose above the city. The fireball could be seen in San Paolo, 18 kilometers away. The Ponte Santa Trinita, the beautiful bridge of Florence, that had spanned the Arno River for over 600 years, had been completely destroyed. The gunfight paused for a moment, but not one person inside the church showed themselves. As a dozen more German troops arrived, the partisans had no choice but to move back into the shadows. Germans quickly secured the plaza. No one saw what was being loaded into the canvas-covered carrier, to the astonishment of those who observed it, Father Lombardi and Captain. Muller climbed into Ziegler's staff car. It sped away, disappearing in the dark night, the truck following close behind. Throughout the long night, 4 more explosions rumbled the cobblestone streets. 1 explosion every hour, 1 more bridge gone. Ponte Carraia, Grazi, Vespucci, San Nicolo, all demolished. The last bridge demolished by 3 a.m. Only the beautiful Ponte Vecchio was spared, but made impassable, by destroying the buildings on both ends to block American tanks from advancing north. At dawn, the people, no longer detained, cautiously moved away from the Pitti Palace. The German army had drifted away just as black smoke drifted away from the city. They went to the river to see their cherished bridges, but all that remained of the 5 beautiful bridges were broken dams of smoldering rubble.